Hi, this is a video tutorial for river meander migration modeling in the iRIC platform. And this is video tutorial number 1, and it's entitled Importing Centerlines. I will give you an overview of what we're going to do in this tutorial. Although there are a number of ways of importing centerlines, we're going to digitize a centerline in Google Earth of a channel that we want to model. Secondly, we're going to save that digitized centerline as what's called a KMZ file, and then we're going to transform it into what's called a KML file. And finally, we're going to import the centerline that we've saved into the iRIC Meander migration platform. So I will also show you the other ways that you can get other types of centerlines other than KMLs into iRIC. Before we begin, there's a few pieces of information that you want to have on hand. At the outset, you're going to need to know what geographic projection that you're working in. You're going to need this throughout the whole project, so you need to establish that. You also need to have an idea of where you're going to begin digitizing your centerline and where you're going to stop. How this relates to the actual area of concern of your model is something that I will talk about in another tutorial. Right now, let's just get the centerline and get it into iRIC, okay? And finally, you're going to have to know a characteristic channel width. It's, when we say characteristic, we are referring to those dimensions of the river at the 2-year recurrence interval flow. Again, more about that another time. Okay. First of all, digitizing in Google Earth. We're going to have to do a number of things. One of them is make sure we know what the date of the photos are. As I said before, we're going to have to estimate the top and bottom of our reach. We will then add what in Google Earth is called a path, which will become our centerline, and then we're going to save it. First of all, Google Earth. Here we have Google Earth, and I happen to know where I'm going, what I'm interested in. It's an area of the Sacramento River that I'm familiar with. It's a reach that I call the Ord Ferry Reach, because there's a location in the middle of it called Ord Ferry. And I note here that the imagery, well, it says 2015, and then other areas it's 2016. Okay. When I get done digitizing, I'm going to establish the date. I know I want to start from about here and end at the bottom. So what I have been doing is to go up here and add path. And then I click kind of at the top of my reach, middle of my reach, down to the bottom of my reach. I double click to save that, and I just call that, let's just call it path. Okay. That just gives me an idea when I'm digitizing and zooming in close where I am. First of all, I'm going to zoom in to the top of the reach here. That's a pretty good scale for me to start. See the river channel there? Now I'm going to again add a path, and I'm going to start here. It is called a centerline, so I'm going down the center of the channel for the most part. There'll be some decisions to make at certain points, and I won't get into the nitty-gritty of those details right now, but I will talk about a couple of them as those questions come up. Now I'm digitizing about every channel width here. I'm trying to get a single point every time I press the cursor. The program itself will clean up the center line to a certain degree, but the more accurately you can do it the first time, the better. Now I have a decision to make. I've got a bar coming up, actually sort of an island here. Now the decisions are somewhat subjective, but one of the questions you can ask yourself is, where would the 2-year flow go? And I think that this bar is most vegetated on the south bank and least vegetated on the north bank, so I suspect that there would be some curvature to the flow, but probably not as curved as the center line. So I'm going to estimate it like that. Okay, now a couple of things that come up here. I found myself charging along and I didn't notice this bar. If you want to remove points, you right click and you can go backwards. Okay, now I think the flow would cut over the top of this unvegetated bar. Now if you're unsure about how much curvature to put in here, of course you can do two different center lines digitized at a different degree and then run them both and run a sensitivity analysis and see how much difference it makes. Because I don't want to keep digitizing here while I'm on screen and doing this particular video, what I will do is I will pause the video and finish it up. Okay? So here I am at the end of the reach, and I have some bars down here, come through the bridge, another unvegetated bar. There's my line that shows me that I pretty much ended up right there. Double click, stops the path, and then you give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it SAC for Sacramento River, OF for Ord Ferry, and I notice down here that my date says 2015. If you're concerned about the different dates of different maps, you'll have to deal with that. But for the most part, 2015 is going to be good for us. Okay. Now you'll see that that's been saved here in Google Earth. In order to export it so that we can use it, we right-click, we go down to Save Place As, and then we find an appropriate folder to put it in with Centerlines, and you can see it saves it as a KMZ file. Here we go. Now the next thing to do is to save that KMZ file. First of all, for those of us who are not completely familiar with KML and KMZ, which I wasn't, KML is an acronym for Keyhole Markup Language, a language that Google acquired, and it's the file that gets saved in Saved Geographic Information System. A KMZ file is simply a KML file that's compressed, and therefore the Z meaning zipped. It's a zipped KML. So when you digitize in Google Earth, it assumes that you want it zipped, and it creates a KMZ. Since we want a KML, we're going to have to unzip it. And now I will show you how you unzip a file. Okay, here's where we saved our file, Ord Ferry 2015. You simply right-click on it. You have the zip program, and you extract files. Then it extracts them to a folder. You can see right here. Inside the folder there's a KML file. It doesn't rename it to the name that you had it and calls it a DOC. Now I happen to have made one yesterday that I will end up using, so I won't rename this one at this point. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to import our KML file into iRIC. Just to let you know where we're going with this, first thing we do when we open iRIC is we set our projection. Then we select what's called a grid creation algorithm. You'll see what that is, but there are different programs in iRIC, and in order to create grids, there are different ways to do it. We have one that we've developed for Centerlines. Okay, you import the file, and now in the process of this I'm going to show you how you import other kinds of files, not just KMZs. Okay, here we have our icon for opening the iRIC platform. First of all, you open the iRIC platform and you want to create a new project. Now it gives you a choice of all these different iRIC programs. We want what we're calling JP, which is the Johannessen and Parker Meander migration model. Okay, now we're going to bump into a couple of these error warning messages. These are in iRIC because many of the other programs in iRIC use enormous data files, and it takes a lot of time and effort to import them, and if you don't import them correctly, to deal with that. So it has these messages that say, warning, do you really want to do this? Well, in our case we have very tiny files, and even if you make an error it doesn't matter. Nonetheless, we're going to say yes and say it's okay to these various things. Okay. Very first thing you do is to set the projection. You come up to File, Property, Coordinate System. You go to Edit. And I happen to know the coordinate system, the NAD 83 Zone 10. Let's see, there we go. There it is. NAD 83 UTM Zone 10. You set that coordinate system. Okay. Once the coordinate system is set, we actually have to create the grid that will make and display the center line. You go to Grid, select Algorithm to create grid. It won't surprise you greatly that it's the JP Grid Creator. Now, in this dialog box we have to deal with three things. You leave the node spacing set to half channel to this. Just leave that. First one is, and this is where you can import different kinds of center lines. If you've made one in Esri, ArcGIS, you can import a shapefile. If you happen to have center lines that we used to make for our Meander migration code in MATLAB, you can import a .dat file. But we have a KML file that we've made, so we have to choose that. Now, we'll go choose the input file. I'm going to get a KML file. Now, I'm going to go get my KML. Keep a folder called Centerlines, makes it easier. And we go to look for the KML of that area. Okay. Importantly, we have to put a width in. Now this is the width of the characteristic flow, which is the 2-year recurrence interval. You have to know this 232 meters. And go create grid. Another checking for us to see if we really want to deal with this data. And we say yes. Okay. What we're doing now is going to do a little bit of a summary. What we did was in Google Earth we digitized a center line, which we then saved as a KMZ file, which was unzipped to a KML file. And thirdly, we brought that center line into iRIC. If you have any questions about this or need help, there's a email link that you can do it. I have to say that this method of bringing Centerlines in by just digitizing in Google Earth and saving as a KMZ is phenomenally efficient. We've done it many other ways, and this beats them all. Okay, thank you very much.